Welcome to another fun-filled edition of Second City Sports Zoom Style.
Zoom Style.
Along with Lakeena McGee, which is she. I am Sydney Brown, which is me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, that's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow me at Keena McGee on the Twitter and at Keena_McGee on the IG.
You can follow this podcast, Second City Sports, along with our other podcast programming from War Media by simply going to War on Anchor on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. Just type in that search engine box, War on Anchor. That's WARR on Anchor. You can go to our website, weareregalradio.com for more information. That's WEAREREGAL radio.com. And you can watch us on the YouTube at War Media, once again at WARR Media. That's on YouTube. You can not only listen to us, but watch us do our thing live. And you can follow us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media on all social media platforms. So it's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And thank you very much in advance for your support as we take our bows and throw kisses to the crowd. Thank you for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
And we are unapologetically fun. And speaking, before we get into our top topic, Lakeena, shout out to Dave Watson, who joined us in our last episode on Saturday. Him, along with Matt Peck, another friend of the show, they're part of the Bulls Outcasts podcast you can watch on YouTube. They gave us a little, Lakeena called it street cred during their post-game show on Saturday following the Bulls and the Spurs. We'll review that game for you coming up in our next segment. Matt Peck, he has a funny way of explaining things, but I didn't take it personally. If you know his personality, you heard him on the show before. He's a fun-loving guy. He's a nice guy. I'll call him the president of Bulls Nation. Him and Dave Watson and John Sabine, who hope we can get on the program and then down the line, they do a great job. Of course, you saw those guys when they were on NBC Sports Chicago's Bulls Outsiders, and now they do their own thing with the Bulls Outcasts podcast. They gave us some love on Saturday over the weekend. So if you don't believe us, go to my Twitter page at SidKid80 and you'll see all the details and hear it as well.
You also listen to them live on Hot Mic, on the Hot Mic app, so make sure you check that out, as they do a lot of the Bulls, maybe not all the games, but all the Bulls games, sort of a variation of what they did they were at NBC Sports Chicago. So if you've been missing them, they're right there on YouTube, like you said, also on Bow on Sports on YouTube, so on the YouTube page, so make sure to check them out.
All right, Lakeena, let's start off with the NCAA tournament as we wind down the rounds of 16 and 8. The Final Four will take place in Indianapolis next weekend, but let's review what happened this past weekend, and we'll start off locally with the Loyola Ramblers of Chicago. Their season is now over as they lose to the Oregon State Beavers 65-58 on Saturday. Ethan Thompson led Oregon State with 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. Cameron Cutwick led the Ramblers with 14 points, 10 rebounds. Lakeena, looking at this game, the Oregon State came prepared. They took a page out of Loyola's playbook from their game against the Final Illini last weekend. Loyola struggled shooting from the field and shooting from the three-point line. They missed some free throws too, but give this team credit. At least they got back in the game late in that second half. But Oregon State just made enough shots, including that Lucas kid who wears jersey number 2, Jacob Lucas. He made some big shots down the stretch. Every time that the shot clock got down, he made the big shot. He made the big plays for Oregon State. Oregon State was just too much to handle before Loyola down the stretch. Thus, the Rambler season ends in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, you feel for Loyola, and you kind of like Ethan Thompson's a senior. He's first team All Pac-12. So if you haven't watched a lot of Oregon State hoops, which I'm sure a lot of you probably haven't, but he's actually one of the consistent senior leaders and one of the consistent scorers on that team. So I wasn't surprised that he had a big game. As for Loyola, I mean, God, they were like that 5 for 23 from 3. And if you're Illinois, you're probably thinking, really? They could have had to struggle against us? Really? But look, I mean, but look, Oregon State kind of, I don't want to say they dominated, but I think they kind of jumped on Loyola because, Dave, like we said in our preview, their styles are very similar, but Oregon State was able to kind of slow the tempo down with Loyola, and Loyola, they were shooting, they had good looks, but they just weren't going in. So, you feel for Cameron Cudlick and Lucas Williamson. We'll see if they take advantage of the NCAA rule and they decide to come back next year. I don't think they will, but I'm sure Loyola fans would love to see that happen. But look, you got to give Oregon State all the credit because look, they smothered Loyola and they were able to and unlike Loyola, they were able to make the shots.
Yeah, the problem I saw from Loyola was they had only a total of 8 points coming off their bench. They did have some balanced scoring throughout their starting lineup. Brendan Norris had 10 points. Lucas Williamson, who probably played his last game, as you mentioned, he had 10 points. 10 points for the Ramblers. It was just that. I didn't think Oregon State's defense was that great. Yeah, they had some key rebounds down the stretch, but as you mentioned, Loyola shot the ball bad, especially in that first half. They were still lucky to be in it. I know as we talked about before, Lakeena, even before this tournament, the strength of this team is defense, and offensively it goes to Cameron Cudlick, who had a great season. But Loyola, give them credit. Like I said, they battled back. It's just you're not going to win too many games. I don't care what level of basketball you're talking about, high school, college, overseas, NBA. You're not going to get away with shooting the ball too much, shooting the ball terribly and expect to win games consistently that way. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, and I feel for Williamson and Cudlick, who were the holdovers from that Loyola team that went to the Final Four a couple years ago. But I think that's a veteran Oregon State squad, and they're looking, good for them and good for Wayne Tickle, who's done a great job with that program. And look, 16 points in the first half for Loyola, that's not going to win you games. It just isn't. And look, that game was not good for anybody's psyche. That game was tough to watch. So I was just like, if you guys saw my tweets, I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I didn't miss much again. So, but look, I commend Loyola for, trying to come back, but they just dug themselves in too big of a hole. So.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Lakeena. No pun intended. Porter Moser. Does he come back next season? Or Indiana? I know people talked about that. Mike Woodson, former Hoosiers player and a former NBA player and head coach, both assistant and head coach throughout the years. He's taken the job. We'll get into that a little bit later. But there's DePaul is out there. Marquette was out there, but Shaka Smart moves from Texas to the state of Wisconsin to take that job. I'm sure there's a few more schools, especially on the East Coast, that would like to offer to have Mr. Moser's services. Do you think that Porter will be back on the north side next year, or do you think that there's some school that we're not talking about that will come out of nowhere to give him a much-deserved pay raise and he'll take the job?
I think he'll test the market. You're human. Of course, you're going to test the market. You're a human being. But I think, look, Loyola's got a pretty good endowment, so I'm thinking that maybe that he probably will ultimately say, but I think he's going to look around and see, okay, what's out there. You got Texas is still out there, too, although we'll talk about that in a little bit. There are a couple of names that are being floated around. DePaul, although for what I read, Dwayne Peavy, who's AD there, he's actually circled on a guy, already.
Oliver Purnell.
No, actually, Kenny Payne, who was actually one of Cal's top assistants. He's actually over at New York, being Tibbs' top assistant now. There are a couple others that are still out there too. So I'm sure. I'm sure Porter. Look, you're human. You're going to test the market, but I think he'll ultimately stay at Loyola. What about you?
Selfishly, I hope he stays at Loyola. I can't believe I was reading through his statistics the other day. He's been there for a whole decade now. Yeah. So, and you have to give him credit. He started from the ground up, and look where they're at now in the Missouri Valley. I know some people said they need to move out of their conference to perhaps go to the Big East or some other better conference. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's not as easy as people make it seem, folks. It just doesn't work that way. If it worked that way, they would have done it a long time ago. So there you go. But selfishly, I hope he stays. But like you said, he's human. I don't blame him if he tests the market. You can force Loyola to pay up. I think he's making over $9,000. I believe it is.
Yeah.
So if Loyola could pony up just a little bit more to make it a shade over $1 million, he'll stay. He deserves it.
Oh yeah,
Because remember, Lakeena, the year after they made it to the Final Four in 2019, if it wasn't for them losing in I believe it was in a conference tournament, they would have made the tournament again. So he's had success after the Final Four appearance in 2018. So he has the resume. So the question is, will he be paid fairly?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the market's going to be for him, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of schools that are going to be vying for his services. So I think he ultimately stays. I think he seems like a pretty loyal guy. He has a home there too. He's got young kids. Well, not young. I think they're about high school age now and a little bit older. But I think he'll stay though ultimately.
I think so too, and we talked about this before, Lakeena. Before we move on, he's gotten some pretty high-profile second-class kids to go there to the to that university. Of course, Lucas Williamson from Whitney Young, of course, Cameron Crockway we talked about. So, as I said before, with these college coaches here in the state of Illinois, and especially in the city of Chicago, Loyola, DePaul, especially Chicago State, even though they've been struggling for I don't know how many years, but we all know the blue chippers will go to Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina, in Kansas. Okay, we have to accept that. But for those schools in the state of Illinois, especially in the city of Chicago, can you get those secondary kids to build your program up so you have a consistent track of winning? You'll be able to steal one of those blue chippers to come play for you. Right now, Loyola is the closest thing to consistency in the city of Chicago as far as within the city limits as far as college basketball is concerned. Yes, University of Illinois is down in Champaign, and they get some kids from Chicago, but we haven't had blue chippers stay here in a long, long time. And can you develop relationships with these publicly high school coaches? That's the key.
Yeah, that's going to be the big key here. Whoever gets the ball out, also with Porter Moser too. I mean, that's important. If you're trying to get those, those second tier guys to stay in the city, yeah, you're going to have to, and I think they're going to have to refurbish that arena too, because I think that their facilities are still pretty are pretty good, but they could be better, especially if you're trying to get these guys to play, and go away, out of state. So that's going to be another thing that the coach is going to have to worry about too. So maybe just see what he does.
You're listening to Second City Sports along with Lakeena McGee, which is she. I am Sidney Brown, which is me, as we talk about the NCAA tournament action, reviewing it from the weekend as the round of 16 and 8 will conclude. Taking a look at the action from Saturday, Lakeena. Baylor gets by Villanova 62-51. Jermaine Samuels led Villanova with 16 points. Adam Flagler led Baylor with 16 points and 3 rebounds. On our last episode, Lakeena, I said Villanova was primed for the upset. They just didn't have enough down the stretch. They played with Baylor early on, but Baylor made some big shots down the stretch to get the 11-point victory.
Yeah, look, you kind of, if only Gillespie was still there for Villanova, I think they probably would have had a opportunity to pull off somewhat the upset. But you can kind of tell that not having him there, I think that it was very glaring. And look, like you said, I mean, look, they don't. Baylor show why they're the number one seed. They're one of the number one seeds, I think. Look, I think Butler stepped up. Adam Flagler stepped up for them too. So they made the shots late. I mean, they trailed for a little bit, against Villanova, but they were able to kind of turn on late. And I think look, good for them. And we'll be interested to see what happens in their Elite Eight game.
All right, Arkansas gets by Oral Roberts, 72-70. Max Abmas led Oral Roberts, I should say, with 25 points. Jalen Tate comes up big with the 22 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 assists. Say that 5 times fast for the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a crazy game. I mean, you thought that Oral Roberts, they kept up as long as they could, and they still had a chance to win. If Amos had hit that 3-pointer, they would have been going to the Elite Eight. I think. Look, Arkansas escapes this by the hair on their chins, as they say. So, but look, I mean, look, Eric Musselman has done a great job with that program, and look, they're going to be facing Baylor, in the South Region Final. That's old Southwest Conference, vibe. So it's been a while since they played each other. So it's definitely people who were big fans of that conference growing up, like us, I think are going to be looking forward to that game. Should be a lot of fun.
And the last game from Saturday, number 2 Houston, the Cougars destroyed number 11 Syracuse 62-46. Buddy Boeheim scored 12 points and grabbed 6 rebounds for Syracuse, while Justin Gorman led Houston with 13 points and 10 rebounds.
Oh my, look, Houston's probably one of like the best defenders of the 3-pointer in the country. So, and that's what they did to Syracuse. They smothered Syracuse and said, okay, y'all got we got a little bit of kind of a zone style, defense of our own. And they couldn't, just hit the shots. I mean, they were also 5 for 23 from 3-point range. And, again, that's not going to do it. And look, I mean, Quentin Grimes, who I believe was the conference player of the year in that conference, led the way with 14. And I think, look, Kelvin Sampson, however you feel about him, he's done a great job building that Houston program. And look, that should be a very interesting matchup between them and Oregon State, because, Oregon State, this is their first Elite Eight appearance since, I know 82, but of course, there was some stuff that happened and they had to vacate that. So 1960, okay, fine. It gets confusing, but, that should be an interesting one there over. And like I said, the Midwest region with Illinois being gone, that's wide open. So this is Houston's chance to kind of, break through and go back to the Final Four for the first time in like 30 some odd years.
Yeah, since we were kids.
Move, yeah.
Now let's move over to last Sunday's action. First up, the number 1 seeded Gonzaga Bulldogs. They get by the Creighton Blue Jays 83-65. Andrew Nieberhard scored 17 points for Gonzaga, and Creighton. Need I say more? It was a good year for them, but there were no match for Gonzaga.
It was like, man, all right, okay, when does Florida State Michigan start? I mean, like, okay, Drew Timme had 22.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. They were no match for them. I mean, I just look, like I said, Creighton had a nice season. Second straight year they win, at least to share the Big East title, the regular season title, but it was just Gonzaga was just too much for them.
Speaking of Michigan and Florida State, I predicted this to be a classic finish. It did not turn out that way, even though I predicted Michigan to win. Shout out to Chicago's very own Juwan Howard, as the Wolverines are a step closer to getting to the Final Four. They defeated the Florida State Seminoles 76-58. Malik Osborne led the Seminoles with 12.6 rebounds. Franz Wagner led the Wolverines with 13 points and 10 rebounds. Lakeena, at one point in that first half, Michigan scored 14 points off of turnovers from Florida State, and Florida State had a total of 14 points in that first half. They couldn't get anything going. Speaking of the Seminoles, Michigan State, especially inside with Dickinson and Wagner, they dominated the Seminoles inside, and they didn't have a chance.
They basically dominated this matchup from the word go. Michigan did, and
yes.
I was surprised. I thought that maybe it was going to be sort of like a street ball, and it was going to be
Me too.
It was going to be a high scoring game, and then we all felt that way. But Michigan said no. So look, I mean, they've actually been playing very well without Isaiah Livers, I should say. And look, he's I mean, like that. Dickinson, Wagner. I mean, look, those are guys. They've stepped up in his absence, so we'll see if he'll be able to play the rest of the way. But look, at least so far, Michigan's looked really good without him.
All right, number 6, the USC Trojans are a step away from going to the Final Four. They defeated their Pac-12 rival, the Oregon Ducks, 82-68. Isaiah White led the Trojans with 22 points, while Eugene Omerwell led Oregon with 28 points, and he grabbed 10 rebounds. USC, they're not known as a basketball school. They have been known as a basketball school for a long time. You could talk about O.J. Mayo from a decade and a half ago. Of course, we were teenagers back in the early 90s. Harold Miner.
Yes. George Raveling, those George Raveling
exactly. They were close to relevancy nationwide. But this USC Trojans team, I'll be honest, I did not watch one game during the regular season. I caught a couple of their games during the tournament. The Mobley twins, they are outstanding. We talked about them last week.
Yeah.
They're one step away from the Final Four. People better take notice. The Pac-12 hoops program, they came out of nowhere this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, they have about 12 guys. They're like 6'9" and taller. So that's,
yeah.
Remember, I saw that stuff like earlier in the year. But look, I've seen a lot of USC. I mean, they looked really good, and like I said, there's a lot of depth in that team. And I thought this was going to be other game I thought it was going to be a lot closer. It wasn't. I mean, they dumped, the Trojans down there from the word go. Oregon struggled. If you're an Iowa fan, you probably think, really? Again, you're not the Big Ten team, you're thinking, really? I mean, the others roll against us. But, look, I mean, these two know each other well, so they're in the same conference. So, Andy Enfield has done a great job bringing that Florida Gulf Coast, lob, dunk city, sort of, although they're a little more than dunk, so they can get you the threes too. So, but look, the USC has looked really good, to get better at the right time.
And our game of the night from last Sunday was the UCLA Bruins, the 11th seeded Bruins out of the East region. They upset number 2 Alabama Crimson Tide 88-78 in overtime. Jamie Jaquez scored 17 points for UCLA, and Keon Ellis led Alabama with 10 points and 9 rebounds. Lakeena, we talked about this a little bit before we started the show. Alabama missed 2 free throws down the stretch in regulation. UCLA hit theirs. Of course, the Alabama got away with going into overtime, hitting the game tying 3 with time running out. That was a classic finish, but UCLA, they were the better team, and they picked it up on the word go when that 5-minute overtime session started. And Alabama, they were upset. They had a great year, but it's the little things you have to do down the stretch to win ball games, and it just wasn't they didn't do that. It was just, I'm not going to say it wasn't their time, but no disrespect to UCLA, but I think Alabama lost it more than UCLA wanted. How about you?
We both, I think. Look, UCLA, they could have, crawled under a table, and, they could have wavered when, the three-pointer was hit, but which was being a great play by. But how the people are, they should have fouled him or whatever. But, look, Look, Big Cronin's got his guys playing very well at the right time. And, I remember Steve Lavin, who used to coach there. Of course, he does, TV for Fox Sports and FS1. He said that UCLA could be a Final Four team. So, and also, too, believe it or not, this is actually their first, UCLA at USC, this is actually their first time, being in the league in the same year. So, it should be fun, these Elite Eight games coming up. But right now we got a great writer, and she covers sports for a long time. She still does. She's actually a writer and editor for Deadspin. She has a book that's out now called Sideline. She is Julie DiCaro. Julie, how are you?
Hi guys, how are you?
We're doing well. We're happy to have you here. We're happy to have you. Happy to have you with us. What do you want folks to come out of your book? I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but the concept is I think something that everybody should be a must read for everyone. I think tell everybody who don't know too much. Tell what's the gist of your book.
Yeah, I mean, sports is honestly just the sort of the entree into all the issues that we talk about in the book, whether we're talking about, issues of, the LGBTQ community or violence against women or racism or equal pay, whatever it is, issues that are facing women across the board in this country and in other countries. Sports, everything in sports is sort of on steroids just because it's one of the few spaces left. Well, I don't want to say the few spaces, but it is a space that is very predominantly run by white men still. And so everything that happens feels like it's sort of amplified by 10. And so I thought it was just a real easy way to sort of talk about some of these issues. I mean, when you have an entire stadium chanting equal pay for a women's team that is clearly head and shoulders better than our men's team and brings in more money, that sort of is a good way to start the conversation about equal pay. So that was sort of the idea for the book, was that everything that we talk about are, it's not just a sports book. It's a book about feminism, but sports makes it really easy to talk about.
And speaking of the equal pay issue, Julie, of course, I agree with you that the women's soccer team, they're much better fundamentally than the men's team. Obviously, if you go to basketball, the WNBA, fundamentally, they're better than the men half the time. But some people will argue that because of the popularity, they don't deserve the equal pay, and they don't deserve at least half of the attention than the men's sports do. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, they can't really make that argument with the women's soccer team because they bring in more money than the men. There are household names on the women's team, which there aren't typically on the men's teams. I mean, I think soccer fans know about Christian Pulisic, but, for the rest of the country, I doubt they could name anyone on the men's team. And when we talk about the WNBA, Howard Megdal had said something great. He was like, let's dump 25 years of marketing and money into the WNBA and then come back and talk to me about which one is more popular, because the men's game, has had 25 years of marketing, not just from the league itself, but from Nike and Adidas and, everyone else involved, whereas the women haven't had that. And, there are WNBA teams that are profitable. There are NBA teams that are not profitable. And it was as recent as 1984, 85 that the NBA was actually thinking they might go under. So, let's put the resources into the women's game that we've been putting into the men's game and then come back in 30 years and see where we are.
Well, and also, too, with the soccer, Julie, like you said, I mean, the men's team, of course, granted, that was an under 23 team, I should say. They failed to make the Olympics for the third straight time. So, to your point, in that sense, it oh God, terrible. You and I can talk about soccer for days, Julie. It's crazy. But, you also talk about Serena, too. I mean, you look at Naomi Osaka, and she, I don't want to say she's past the torch because, Serena is still playing at a pretty high level. But you look at, tennis, women's tennis has far outstayed the men's tennis. You got the big three, you got Federer and Nadal and Djokovic, but tennis is sort of like in a sort of a kind of a similar situation as a soccer team. And now it is equal pay. It took a long time for them to get there, but, finally, we're right there now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's always been a market for women's sports, especially those of us that grew up after Title IX, where, playing sports and high school sports and college sports were just as much a part of our lives as they were our brothers and our dads and our uncles and cousins and everyone else. So it's really weird to me that people think that there's not a market for women's sports. And I think the Sabrina Ionescu copy of Slam magazine sold out faster than any other copy. So this idea that there's no market out there for women's sports is just wrong. It's just that no one's put the resources into it.
Julie DiCaro of Deadspin is joining us here on Second City Sports, along with Lakeena McGee, which is she. I am Sidney Brown, which is me. Julie, sticking with women and broadcasting, shouts out to NBC Sports California. They're the home for the Sacramento Kings. They had an all-female broadcast last Saturday against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I did check out some of their game. And it was very interesting, of course, not to give my entire life story away, but my late mother, she was a big sports fan. She'll be delighted to be a part of this conversation right now. And not to give your age away, but of course, we all remember a time that women in sports broadcasts, especially in front of the television, they were starting to come into it in the 90s, especially with Andrea Kramer, Hannah Storm on NBC, now with ESPN. And others that will soon follow into the new millennium. But what do you think about the roles of women in sports broadcasting now, not just only in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well?
Yeah, I think that there are, we're starting to make strides, right? I mean, we saw, and you mentioned Kate Scott calling the Golden State Warriors game. We had Toronto Raptors had a game called by Megan McPeak and Kia Nurse last week as well, which was huge. It's interesting because when you turn on ESPN, you see a very diverse talent pool in front of the camera. And so it feels like we're making huge strides. But if you take ESPN out of the mix, then suddenly you're back to a pretty non-diverse field. And we keep having these one-offs where, we had a bunch of women call an NHL game, and then we have, women calling the NBA game. But we're not to the point where it feels like we should be, where it's just norm that, this just happens to be a game where we have an all-female crew. And we are starting to see women behind the cameras and women in executive producing positions and making more decisions, but definitely nowhere near where we should be, considering that Gail Sirens called a game in 1980 or something ridiculous like that, 89. And then it took 35 years for us to get Beth Mowins to call another NFL game, to have another woman do it. So, it's happening, but I think we always hope that, a woman will do it and then she'll hold the door open and a stampede of women will come behind her. And we just haven't seen that. We're still limited to these sort of it's a celebration for Women's History Month thing, which is great, but just feels like we should be a lot further along.
Yeah, it should be a lot more though too, right? I mean, look, Beth Mallons is now going to be part of the crew that's going to be occasionally doing, Cubs baseball, and then,
Yeah.
and then you have like many others, and I kind of feel like, we're making those steps, Julie, but we still got a ways to go, and it's just unfortunate because there are a lot of great female sportscasters out there, and it's just, I am glad though that they are starting to kind of, we're starting to see more and more. Lisa Byington just became the first woman to do a men's NCAA basketball tournament, but what do you think has to be done to sort of, to keep continuing for the, for females, and particularly females of color like myself, to kind of make those strides?
Absolutely. We've got to get more women in the pipeline. And one of the things that is so discouraging to me when I talk to women on high school and college campuses, they'll say, I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be a broadcaster and do play-by-play, but I've seen the harassment that women in sports put up with. And so I'm just going to go into PR instead. And so we're losing women. We're actually losing women in the industry because it's like, who has the time or the energy to put up with the stuff that women in sports broadcasting put up with? So there's that issue. And then I think that, unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for some of these older white guys who hire only what they know to retire and get out of the industry, and hope that they're replaced either with more forward-thinking white guys, or better, replaced with women, and particularly Black women and women of color, who it doesn't, because I think that for a lot of men, putting a woman in a position that has traditionally been held by men feels like a risk. It's really not a risk at all. I mean, it's not any more risk than putting in an unknown white guy in there, but for some reason it feels to them like a bigger risk. And we've got to get people who are used to working in inclusive environments enough that it doesn't feel like a risk to them, or someone who has a little bit of guts and is like, yeah, you know what, I think and me, let's go ahead and try it. And that feels like we just don't have that right now.
I forgot to mention this at the top of our interview, Julie. I met you a couple years ago working with the D and Davis show. You were working at the 670 The Score in Chicago. You were involved in many projects, and one in particular I want you to get into with our audience. You worked with Tony Gilwood. We worked the you-know-what out of it, and he's still doing great things for NBC Sports Chicago. You guys did a project or going deep into the investigation of Michael Jordan's father's murder, James Jordan, from 1993. Tell us, how did that project come about?
God, working with Tony Gill is one of the great pleasures of my life. He is, I think, going to do huge things, and he's, continued to impress people everywhere he goes. But Tony and I were sort of sitting around late night one night talking, and we're sort of like, I wish that there was some kind of investigative mystery, because I was talking about how much I love true crime podcasts. And I was like, we need to do a sports true crime podcast. And I don't even know how we just started throwing out mysteries that in sports, and of course it was did Michael Jordan really retire, or did David Stern suspend him? All the rumors. And then eventually we sort of were like, wait, wasn't there something about how one of the guys in jail for killing Michael Jordan's dad maybe didn't do it? And then we started looking into it, and we were like, wow, there is a story here that people really need to hear. And I still think people need to hear it because it's not out there nearly enough. But the great thing about Tony was that I could write it, I could research it and write it, but when it comes to doing stuff in audio producing, I'm clueless. So I could just say to Tony, listen to an episode of Serial. That's what I want it to sound like. And he would just take a lot off, and he made it sound so much better, I think, than the work that I put into it. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. We got great feedback from it. I wish we'd been able to do another season because it was really just a great time.
It's still up on the wherever you get your podcasts and stuff. So make sure you guys check that out. It is still out there if you haven't had a chance to listen to it. But Julia, let's talk about some the current sports headlines that are coming on all local and nationally. I know you're an Indiana grad, for anybody that doesn't know, and shout out to the women's team, vying for their first trip to the Final Four tonight against Arizona, another team that's going to be vying for their first trip to the Final Four. The men's team, they've hired Mike Woodson, who played for Bob Knight back in the late 70s and to 1980. He actually is going to have Thad Matta there to kind of also be his top assistant. So what do you think about the hire?
God, when I was at IU, Thad Matta was the bad guy from Ohio State. So having him be in the athletic department is sort of I don't know about that. But look, I mean, Mike Woodson, I think, has a terrific reputation. It means something to me that it's someone who comes from IU, who knows what basketball means to that community. And having played on, as of right now, the last undefeated team in college basketball, that means something to us as a community. And so I was really pleased with the hire. I was like, thank God they're not throwing Steve Alford's name out there again, because I was going to go down there and like have to have a talk with some people. But I was really surprised by it and how quickly it happened. And I think it's a good hire, and I think it's been pretty well received. So we'll just see what happens. But it has been good to see someone from IU coming home, and especially someone who's so like universally liked by people.
I thought you was throw out the name Bruce Pearl, but that's a whole nother issue.
No, thank you. No Bruce Pearl.
For you young kids that's listening and watching us, go look up information about what he did to Deion Thomas in Illinois back in the 90s. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Sticky fingers is, I'll leave it at that. So I'm trying to keep that clean. So Julie DiCaro of Deadspin.com is joining us here on Second City Sports, along with Lakeena McGee. I am Sydney Brown. Julie, let's stick with college basketball locally. Of course, at the top of our show, we talked about Porter Moser and Loyola. They were knocked out of the round of 16 by Oregon State. Of course, they made the Final Four back in 2018. Do you think that he'll stay in Loyola, or do you think he goes to a bigger conference to get a bump in pay?
It's a great question, because to be honest, I'm surprised that he's still at Loyola. Like, I thought after the Final Four he'd be out of there, but he really does seem that he values things more than just how big the program is and how much money and how many boosters you have behind you. Or at least he says what he says. I mean, I guess we're about to find out how much he values that. He really does seem very settled in Loyola and very happy there. I guess we're going to find out if he's, really telling the truth or not when he says, that he cares about other things. But Loyola has become now a national name in college basketball. I mean, I was just remembering with my husband, like when Gonzaga was like the St. Bonaventure of, it was a team you'd always pick as like an upset in the 90s. Like, oh, I bet Gonzaga can make it to the Sweet 16. And that was like a huge upset. And now, Gonzaga is a basketball powerhouse, and he has the chance to do the same thing with Loyola. And that seems something that he wants to do. So, I mean, I can't, make windows into his soul, but I feel like he had the chance to leave. He had the chance to leave after the Final Four, and he's still there. So if I were a betting person, I'd say he stays.
What about DePaul? I mean, they're finally going to be able to find a new coach. And can DePaul get to at least like be a flicker of what they used to be?
I don't know. I mean, my dad went to DePaul. I went to law school at DePaul. Like, I grew up hearing about DePaul and Tom Kleinschmidt and DePaul basketball and everything. So it's depressing to see Quentin Richardson, all the great players that played for DePaul. It's depressing to see where they are right now. I don't know. I mean, they've got so much farther to go, obviously, than Loyola does to sort of get back to where they were. I mean, I guess the good part of it, I guess, is that the name still carries a little bit of prestige and a little bit of swagger with it. We'll see who that appeals to or not. But, I mean, I was actually thrilled when they got Dave Lato back, because his first run with DePaul was so good. And then I don't really know what happened where it all fell apart. But it did, so... I'm cheering for DePaul to get back. I mean, I don't really know what to say. Like, if I could fix their program, I'd be like, hey, here's what you need to do. But unfortunately, I'm just hoping that someone there can figure it out.
Yeah.
All right, Julia, let's stay with the Chicago sports scene. Let's go to pro basketball. The Chicago Bulls, they have new management now, Tours Kanisovich and GM Mark Eversley. They made a couple of big trades last week. Of course, Nikolai Vooch, your all-star from Orlando, is now with the Bulls. He looked good in their first game against San Antonio, even though they lost without a practice. The future seems bright over there on the west side at the United Center. What do you think about the future for the Chicago Bulls?
Yeah, it's nice to not see every time the Bulls make a trade or make a move and just know it's going to be a disaster because John Paxson was behind it. So,
exactly.
And I feel like it was a real investment in Zach LaVine, right? I mean, they, instead of moving him out, they got, rebuilding yet again, they went out and got another all-star to play with him. So I am pretty confident in the front office they've got there right now. I mean, I think you've seen the difference this season just in, the way they play, and when they don't play well, you don't get stupid platitudes from like a Field of Dreams like you got with Jim Boylan. You get actual commentary on like what they did wrong from the coach. So I have a lot of confidence in the Bulls right now. I feel like they're headed in the right direction finally. I hated to see Wendell Carter leave, especially, he was one of those guys that we always thought could do great things in the NBA. way, and maybe he still will. But I don't have this sense of foreboding and dread that I always had whenever John Paxson was behind the stuff.
Now let's talk North. Let's go to the baseball and talk North side for a second. Anthony Rizzo came out and said that they're not going to talk about contract extension with the Cubs. How do you feel about that? And what are your realistic expectations for the team this season?
Has any organization wasted so much goodwill so quickly as the Cubs have? I mean, I'm not even excited. I can't remember the last time I wasn't excited for baseball to start. I don't know. I mean, you want to play this game on the spreadsheet where, you want to keep it down so you can maximize all your money so that Todd Ricketts can run for governor or whatever it is. I mean, just be honest about it. I mean, they're like, oh, we don't have any money. The Ricketts keep saying they don't have money. Well, no one asked you to buy up all of Wrigleyville and convert everything into hotels and restaurants and spend all your money on a real estate development. So I really don't want to hear about how they don't have money. You're freaking billionaires. Like, put some money in the team. So, I mean, I don't feel good about it. The Anthony Rizzo thing, I think, is sort of a real demotivator for fans. I saw a lot of people really upset about that this morning. Yeah. Of course, it doesn't mean they won't make a deal eventually, but Anthony Rizzo is the heart and soul of that team. So, along with Javi Baez. So, you get rid of Anthony Rizzo, I really don't know what you have left. And as far as I'm concerned, the deal was never, okay, we'll try for 5 years and then we'll go back to sucking and trade everyone away and go back to being a bad baseball team. That was never what the deal was supposed to be. It's unfortunate. And, I'm back to where I was when the Tribune owned, which is hoping that they sell the team to somebody that actually cares about the on-the-field product as opposed to everything going on around it.
Let's move over to the South Side, Julie. Talk about
Didn't say that on 670 again.
Let's move over to the.
Let's talk about my real feelings.
Yes, let it all out. Let it all out, Julie.
Purge.
Let it all out.
Let's move over to the South Side. Of course, Eloy Jimenez, the star slugger and the left fielder, he's out for 5 to 6 months. He's going to have surgery soon. Of course, the White Sox are picked by many to do great things, perhaps win the World Series. Where do you see the White Sox in 2021? Do you think they still have a chance to win the World Series, or do you think they'll still can take another step or two before they reach their ultimate goal?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they still have a shot at it, although losing Eloy Jimenez is just huge. I mean, my heart just dropped when I read that. It was so unfortunate, especially for someone who is so poised to have a great season and to really take a leadership position in that team. You've always got a shot, right? I mean, there's always some guy who maybe steps up and has a career year filling in for Jimenez. Right. Or, there's always another team that, everyone thinks is going to win the division who winds up riddled with injuries. So I think they still got a shot at it. I mean, definitely their pitching is where their strength is going to be. So, I mean, that's exciting. I still think they're going to be a ton of fun to watch. And, maybe we get Jimenez back at some point this season, maybe in time to make a run. I guess we'll find out. But, I still think they can do it. I still think they have enough going on in other places on the team, like I said, particularly in the pitching. But, it's a huge blow. And it definitely kind of sucks to see that he's not going to be out there for at least the beginning of the season.
Moment or two left with Deadspin's Julie DiCaro here on Second City Sports, along with Sydney Brown. I'm Lakeena McGee. Last question for me, Julie. The Bears.
Do you have to?
I want to hear
Bears.
I know. I want to hear what Julie thinks, because now that there's rumors that they might try to get Mac Jones, they might try to trade him, get Hill, because he had a nice meeting with them for almost an hour, and with all of this going on, releasing Kyle Fuller and such. What are your thoughts on the Bears, Julie?
It's a mess. I mean, think of where this team was a couple years ago and how fired up we were in this defense that was, this Super Bowl caliber defense that we saw in 2018? Is that how long ago it was?
Yeah.
And it's all just falling apart. And now you're releasing Kyle Fuller, and it's just, and the whole thing is just so depressing. I don't even know where it started to go wrong. I mean, I guess I do. I guess it was Mitch Trubisky is where it all started to go wrong. And I remember at the time us saying, like, being in the room on draft night with Greg Gabriel, who scouted for the Bears for a million years, and him saying, well, this is Ryan Pace's pick. Like, if this doesn't work out, this is going to be his legacy, is Mitch Trubisky. And it's exactly right. So many things to be depressed about with the Bears. I mean, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I'm trying to think of like a good in to talk about the Bears. I mean, the whole thing about how Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are just so delighted with each other, no matter what the results are of what happens, because they really get each other. And they're like two like Tony Robbinses, like two like sales motivational speaker guys going back and forth. And I think they pump each other up, but they don't make good decisions on the field. I don't want Andy Dalton as my quarterback. Like, come on. So that's kind of where I am. You know, it's funny because I saw the Bears the other day post this pictures of Andy Dalton working out, and people were like, "Stop doing this. No one's excited about Andy Dalton." And I'm like, that's exactly how I feel. That's not really very sportsy, or like I don't have any real great insight other than I'm just depressed about the whole thing.
Purge.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let it out, Julie. Go ahead, Sid.
Last question from me, Julie. Of course, listening to your show with Maggie Hendricks from 670 The Score, friend of the show, by the way. Now you're a friend of the show as well. You talked about one of your other interests was your love for music, and I remember one of your guys' shows. You talked about you liked New Edition growing up. So did I, and so I wanted to ask you who was the better quote unquote lead singer, Bobby Brown, Johnny Gill, or Ralph Tresvant? Which one was your favorite?
Ralph Tresvant is the lead singer as far as I'm concerned because he sang all the songs when I was a kid. Bobby Brown, I mean, I didn't expect, because when Bobby Brown left, I was sort of like, oh, that sucks, but whatever. But I didn't expect New Edition to sort of like go off a cliff like they did once Bobby Brown left. And then Bobby comes out with My Prerogative, and what was the other hit song he had?
Every little step.
Every little step. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you guys see the BET Whitney and Bobby thing where they recreated that entire video so perfectly? Oh my God, so good. So, I mean, Ralph Tresvant will always be the like teeny bopper, preteen, New Edition lead singer in my heart. Who do I think has a better voice? Johnny Gill.
Yeah, I think everyone can agree on that. Everyone can agree on all of that.
Ooh, yeah. Not even close, but I'm trying.
Keep trying. Keep trying, Sid.
My.
All
right, that's what I know.
Okay, Sid, mute yourself. I've lost my train of thought. Sideline, Sports Culture and Being a Woman in America is out now on Dalton Books. Check that out. Also, you can read her articles on Deadspin.com. She's a senior writer and editor there. And Julie, where can they find you on social media?
At Julie DiCaro on Twitter and Instagram and everywhere else.
All right, Julie, this was so much fun. We got to do this again.
Yes.
And
sounds good.
All right, so thank you so much. And you stay
Thanks,
safe.
guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Take care. All right, that was Julie DiCaro of Deadspin, former host of 670 The Score and 87.7 The Game. She was there back there during the day. So we had fun with her. We definitely had to bring her back on the program because we just tipped the iceberg a little bit. I didn't want to end the interview on a sad note. I'm kind of glad we did what we did.
Yeah.
And as we always say, we are unapologetically fun for a reason. This is why we give you another example. We back it up with facts.
Yes, we always said, and I'm glad we cover all the gamut with Julie. Also, too, make sure you guys check out her book at Dalton Books. It's right there. Also, it's all audio book too, I believe. So check that out as well. So Sid, you want to take a 20 here? Take a little bit.
We need to cool off. Especially after that great interview with Julie DiCaro. Let's cool off a little bit. Woo.
Yeah, I got to towel off here. We cover the can with Julie, so and I love it. So but don't worry, folks. We'll be right back. We're gonna talk Bulls. They played the first game. It's gonna take a while to kind of get things going. Also, to the potential 17th game in the NFL. Also, some other great stuff too. Also, we're gonna have our baseball picks, our divisional picks. So. Make sure you stay tuned for that. You're listening to Second City Sports along with Sydney Brown. I'm Lakeena McGee.
Zoom style. All right, I'm ready when you are.
Oh.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Second City Sports Zoom style.
Zoom style.
Sorry. Look, we're live, folks. What can you do? I'm Lakeena McGee. You follow me at Keena McGee on the Twitter, and Lakeena is going to be on the IG.
You can follow yours truly, Sydney Brown, on the Twitter and the IG at CK80. Once again, at CK80. That's SIDKID80. That's, excuse me, SIDKID80. You can go to our website, weareregalradio.com, for more information and other fun stuff. And you can follow this podcast, Second City Sports, along with the other podcast programming from War Media by simply going to War on Anchor, which kicks you over to Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and that iHeartRadio app. Wherever you download your podcast, type in that search engine box, WARR on Anchor. And we're also on the Tube, a.k.a. YouTube at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media. On YouTube, you can not only listen to us, but watch us do our thing live. As we take our bows and give you our support in advance. Thank you.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends. Also, I want to clean up something right quick. We just had Julie DiCaro on. Her book, Sports Culture and Being a Woman in America. You can get it also, of course, at Dunn Books, like we said, but you can also available at Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Amazon, wherever you get your books, you know, both ebook, hardcover, and audio. So you're all covered. So you just wanted to kind of clean it up a little bit.
All right, let's kick off the second segment talking about the Chicago Bulls. Lakeena, we had Big Dave Watson on Friday, and we celebrated the trades that Mark Eversley, the GM, and Arturas Kanishevich made in terms of acquiring Nikolai Vujicic from the Orlando Magic, the former All-Star from the team from South Florida. He made his debut this past Saturday against the San Antonio Spurs. He had 21 points and 9 rebounds, but the Bulls lost by 16 to the Spurs, 120-104. Lakeena, looking at that game last Saturday, the Bulls were down 65-39 at halftime. I know many people expected the Bulls to come out flat. Well, they did, but I said to myself, I want to see what kind of pride that this team has for the second half. Of course, they came back. They got it down to under double digits before the Spurs put them away. Let's be honest here. The Spurs took their foot off the gas, but the Bulls showed a lot of heart in that, especially in that second half. Zach LaVine, Kobe White, a couple of other additions coming off the bench. They contribute to knocking down that big lead from the San Antonio Spurs. Yeah. Vujicic looked good. He did not have a practice at all.
Right.
So I'm very hopeful for this Bulls team, but if they want to make a playoff run, they have to turn this thing around quickly. But I'm much more hopeful than we were around this time last week. As we talked about this with Big Dave on Saturday, when they left the floor against Cleveland at the UC on last Wednesday, it was hopeless. You losing to bad teams and blowing big leads like we talked about last week when they were on the road against the Denver Nuggets, blowing double-digit leads. Hopefully you won't see too much of that anymore. I like the future of this Bulls team. Of course, from a trading standpoint, they're not done. They'll pick up on that perhaps this summer. But getting back to what I saw on the court last Saturday at San Antonio, I'm encouraged. Even though they lost the game, I'm encouraged of what they showed, the potential, what they could be in that second half.
I mean, they showed that fight, right? You saw that, you know, this is a completely new and different Bulls team. It's going to take – people need to remember it's going to take a few games to kind of get everybody to mesh. And I think that, you know, the sooner people realize that, the better off they'll be. Look, Vucevic, I mean, he only had probably barely one practice and he scored 21 and had 9 rebounds. Come on now. I mean, I can only imagine what he's going to be like once, you know, he has a full, you know, load of practice in him. You know, Zach, you can kind of tell that ankle sprain is, you know, still bothering him a little bit, you know, so he kind of struggled, but you know, it doesn't sound serious. It's not like it's a low ankle sprain, so you can kind of, you know, play around with it a little bit more with that, and you can try to play through it. But look, I'm a little more hopeful now, and look, I mean, look, it's going to take a while for all these guys to kind of mesh together, as I just said. You know, Thad Young had 10 points off the bench, and you know, Kobe White contributed 13 off the bench too. So look, I think.
Troy Brown Jr. In his first game, 8 points as well coming off the bench. I was really impressed by him.
Yeah, he's a really good kind of like a facilitator in when he was in Boston, and hopefully, look, you know, this is sort of like okay, let's see how these guys, you know, play together, how they look together. And Aminu, you know, he only scored 2 points, but he had a couple, you know, 5 big rebounds to help kind of, you know, start off that comeback. So look, I'm looking forward to see what they're going to do. I mean, of course, they're going to have to clean things up a little bit, of course, but you know what, it's fine. I mean, I'm not. You know, I'm not too worried. I mean, look, you got a Spurs team that was at full strength. So the fact that they were able to keep it close as long as they did, I think, look, I think you got to be feeling encouraged if you're a Bulls fan.
Yes, you have to be encouraged if you're a Bulls fan. Of course, head coach Billy Donovan played with many different combinations throughout that game on Saturday. He wants to see which players mesh with who, which lineups work, which lineups didn't work against the San Antonio Spurs. And you'll see that again for the next few games as we take a look at the schedule for the Chicago Bulls. Of course, when this episode's out, the game against Golden State would already been played. Whether or not Steph Curry played, we'll review that on our next episode coming up on Saturday. But the Bulls currently on their 3-game road trip on the West Coast. So as we mentioned, the Golden State game from yesterday. Of course, tomorrow they'll be at Phoenix at 9 o'clock. And then, of course, on Friday they'll be at Utah. That's at 8 o'clock Chicago time. Started, of course, next Sunday they'll host the Brooklyn Nets for an early start at 1 p.m. at the United Center. Lakeena, they're currently 6 games under 500 as we record this program on a Monday. The Bulls need to make some moves in terms of wins. Like you say, it's going to take a couple more games to get the new guys into the lineup, into the flow of things. You have to develop that chemistry on the floor. But they have a tough schedule, as I just read out to you guys for this upcoming week. Phoenix is no joke. Utah, we know they're up there. It looks like they're going to stay up there due to the injuries for the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll get into the rest of the association, the best and worst from the weekend in just a moment. But looking at the schedule for the Bulls for this upcoming week, there's no easy games here, folks. And it looks like for the next couple of weeks, you may get a break. You may get a break here and there, but for this upcoming week, there are no cakewalks here, folks.
Well, and I think that, look, as long as they keep up that fight that we've seen, at the beginning of the season, especially at the beginning of, when this new trades, once everyone starts to mesh, I mean, look, I think I'm not going to say they're going to be either one of these teams, but I think if they can kind of keep it close and look, if they sneak a win, hey, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, let's party. I mean, but look, I mean, I want to see how this team looks. I mean, but hopefully LaVine, will get a little bit better. I mean, he was going to try to play through an ankle injury. Hopefully other guys successful. Hopefully P. Will can, step up too. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what this team does once. It's going to be great to see how Vucevic looks once he has a few practices in him. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he does because I really think that this is a team that I think I can definitely kind of make that push to get those bottom 4 seeds in the playoffs. Either conference, because either conference, it's pretty much, I don't want to say open at the bottom, but it's a little bit easier to get to the playoffs in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, it is. And sneaking on back into the Bulls schedule once again after next Sunday's game against Brooklyn at the United Center, of course, the following Tuesday, April 6th, next Tuesday, they'll go to Indiana, and then they'll go to Toronto on Thursday, April 8th, and then, of course, next Friday, they'll go to Atlanta. As we mentioned the last couple of weeks, ever since their coaching change and Nate McMillan's running the show now, Atlanta has been playing a whole lot better. Then next Sunday, April the 11th, you'll go to Minnesota. Then you'll go to Memphis for that makeup game on Monday, April 12th. So after this time next week, the schedule does get a little bit lighter. You can collect some wins, but focusing on this week, Lakeena, if you can steal a game or two for either Phoenix or Utah, before you get to Brooklyn next Sunday, you set yourself up well to collect the wins against lesser teams. Now, since you have a better roster, and hopefully Zach's injury with that ankle is not doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, well, it's a low ankle sprain, and I know that they're keeping an eye on it. He's keeping it ice and such. So hopefully, it won't get too serious. I guess it's not unlike LeBron's ankle injury was a higher ankle sprain, which is a little more. You're playing with more muscles and tendons, so. I think it's a little bit bigger risk. A low ankle sprain can kind of play through and just sort of keep it ice and whatnot. So I'm hopefully, but within the next week or two, he'll feel better. He'll be at 100%. Look at us being all doctory now. It's insane. We're not doctors, but we're not going to play one on the podcast. But
you're listening to Second City Sports along with Lakeena McGee. I am Sydney Brown. So we talk Bulls and NBA. Lakeena, let's switch off to the association. What was the best and worst from the weekend from the professionals?
Oh, it's sort of one of those things where you kind of okay, what's going on here? I gotta say the Lakers. I mean, look, they they have had a couple of grinded out wins, and this is probably what you're gonna have to do with with no LeBron, no AD right now. Like Dennis Schroeder has stepped up very well for them, and look, Kuzma's been hitting big shots too. So this is a different style that we've seen when they're at full strength, but they've looked really good. And look, it's okay. This is probably a good thing for them. They got to, do the kind of like battle it out and grind it out. And, back in the A's in the NBA where you got to get those type of games. So I've been impressed with the Lakers. So they've looked pretty good so far. I know kind of lesser tier teams, but look, it's impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, I watched the last 2 Laker games via my computer for over the weekend, and they had to grind up those wins against. They had an easier time with Cleveland in the second half, but they were in the battle with Orlando on Sunday night. Down to the last shot, it was taken by Otto Porter Jr., a former Chicago Bull, and Wendell Carter Jr., both of them now with the Orlando Magic via the trade for Vucevic last Thursday. But the Lakers, they looked good in those couple of games, as you mentioned, Lakeena. They'll have to grind out those wins until LeBron and Anthony Davis get back. Of course, we'll be remiss if we didn't mention that they signed Andre Drummond on Sunday. And so the offense got to go through him and Kyle Kuzma until both their superstars get back. With Andre Drummond, as we kind of predicted that it was going to happen, he signs with the Lakers. He's going to give them some defense, which especially from the interior, which they lacked all season. They lacked all season long. He's going to give them a couple block shots. He's going to give them the rebounds. He's going to give them additional scoring, and especially with LeBron James and Anthony Davis returning in the next, hopefully, month or so. Montrezl Harrell, he had a great weekend for the Lakers. He's going to take pressure off of him as well. So Andre Drummond inserted into that team is going to help them because they need to keep their record above 500 to both their superstars get back, because you don't want to fall into 6th or 7th place where you had to fight for your life to play in their play-in tournament. This Lakers team is too good to be in that predicament. Absolutely. So adding Andre Drummond was huge.
It was big, and I kind of feel like I wasn't surprised by that. I think that that style definitely fits him, and like you said, so that he kind of be like the guy since AD and LeBron are going to be out for another couple of weeks at least. So this was a nice pickup for them, and look, this should be very interesting to see how they mesh. Another thing that came out over the weekend, LaMarcus Aldridge. Former Spur, we all thought that he was going to come back to the Bulls, but he decided to go to Brooklyn, where people were upset about it. I don't know why. If you want, look, say you want to get into it, go ahead. But look, I mean, they haven't won anything. I know people say, well, they're making super teams and such. Look, they haven't won anything yet. So all this talk is moot. People say, well, Adam Silver should have done what, the Lakers did. He did what his predecessor, David Stern, did to the Lakers, and, keeping CP3 from going to the Lakers, with Kobe and them. And I'm like, okay, guys, let's chill out, okay?
Remember, too, the league was owning the now New Orleans Pelicans, but at the time, the New Orleans Hornets, the league they had ownership over that team. What happened with George Shinn, we won't get into that. Look it up for yourselves. But the league had temporary ownership of that team, so that's why that trade was nixed. But like I said, we won't get into that.
Yeah, there were other parameters that kept that trade from happening. So everybody stop blaming David Stern. God rest his soul. People stop blaming him. But I think, but another thing, the Knicks, the Knicks winning against the Bucks. Alec Burks had 21. I mean, I never thought that, look, Coach Tibbs, we saw this in Chicago. I hope, nobody, legs fall off, but that was a nice win for the Knicks, right? I mean, the Clippers, the Clippers have been playing, pretty well. I mean, that was an impressive win against the Sixers. Kawhi had 28, and I think the Clippers are not as long as the Clippers don't fall into those bad habits that we've seen the last couple of years. I think they can will they go over that hump? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, as we mentioned in our last episode, I know you and Dave got into it much more in our last episode. That picking up Rajon Rondo for Lou Williams was huge. I know Rajon doesn't like his nickname Playoff Rondo, but he comes up big in pressure situations. We saw that here in Chicago, even though the team wasn't as good. We saw him throughout his career and with the Boston Celtics, and even with the Lakers to an extent last year, helping them win a title. He comes up big in pressure situations. He plays the point guard position well. He knows when to distribute the ball. He can play a little defense as well. You don't need him to score all the points. That's not his style. He controls the pace. He's the coach on the floor like most point guards are, and he'll help the Clippers team do that. So I can't wait to see Rajon Rondo and his playing with the Clippers. They're another team that they could take advantage of the Lakers' woes right now because both their superstars are out. So the Clippers, with no controversy so far this year, we haven't heard a peep out of Tyronn Lue. So if they could get like you mentioned, Lakeena, if they can get this stuff together in time for the playoffs, they could possibly have a better run unlike a year ago.
Another game that stood out to me Saturday was the Pelicans beating the Mavs. I know hopefully we get
I watched some of that game.
That level was really good. Like Zion Williamson, I mean,
Yes.
had 38 points. Probably one of his highest score of the season. And I mean, the Pelicans kind of kept sort of the Luka, and they didn't have Luka, of course. He rested, but. They were able to kind of take advantage of that. So we got to give the Pelicans props for winning that game.
Yeah, and the Pelicans did look good. And as I mentioned for the last couple of shows, Zion Williamson looks good. I know he's having a very good year, but is being overlooked because the Pelicans are not winning consistently. I know they traded away J.J. Redick to the Dallas Mavericks. He didn't play in that game on Saturday. He'll be in the Mavericks lineup hopefully soon. But Zion could be one of the best players in the league if he stays in shape, and hopefully he can bet David Griffin, the GM, can get some better talent around him. So we'll see what's up for New Orleans going forward. Now, switching over to last Sunday's action, the game of the day, if you want to say, Lakeena, the Phoenix Suns defeated the Charlotte Hornets 101-97 in overtime. Devin Booker led the Suns with 35 points. Devontae Graham led the Hornets with 30 points.
Yeah, just a really impressive win, and that was actually a pretty good game. I think a lot of people think it would be that close, but look, Charlotte's pretty good. Even with ball being out, but I really like what Phoenix is doing, and I love what Monty Williams is doing with that team. And look, with the Lakers being out, I mean, they could probably I don't know if they'll have enough to get to that 1 seed, but I think they'll definitely be in the top 2 or 3, no doubt.
Sticking with the Phoenix Suns for just a moment, Lakeena, do you think Monty Williams is the leading candidate for NBA Coach of the Year? I think so.
I think he's right there in the team picture.
Because they haven't fallen off yet.
Right, and look, I think that Quinn Snyder over in Utah might have something to say about it. Doc Rivers over in Philly, he may have something to say about it. Look, I'm sure Nate McMillan's probably going to want to make a case for himself here if the Hawks end up finishing pretty well. But I think Monty Williams is right up there. I'm glad he's finally getting his due. It seems it's been a while because he was with New Orleans, but then now he's with the Suns, and do best.
Another team another team.
Oh, see, this is live, folks. But I just want to give a quick shout out to Greg Popovich. Guys, 13,000th win, just a third coach to get to that milestone. He joins Don Nelson, who is number 1, and Lenny Wilkes, who is number 2. So I just want to give a shout out to Craig Popovich for reaching that plateau.
Another team to give a shout out to quietly, they making their move up the Western Conference standings, and that's the Portland Trailblazers. They defeated the Toronto Raptors on Sunday, 122-117. CJ McCollum, after injury, played first half of the season. He led Portland with 23 points and 7 rebounds. Pascal Siakam led Toronto with 26 points and 8 rebounds. Lakeena, I don't want to say I feel sorry for Toronto, but in a way, I do. They're 10 games under 500. It looks like they're not going to make the playoffs. They may see a wholesale change coming this summer. But on the flip side, Portland, they're 28-18. They're not getting LaMarcus Aldridge. Obviously, they're not getting Andre Drummond. But hopefully they'll get some other guys back to help out Damian Lillard, and C.J. McCollum. I know Carmelo Anthony has been carrying them for a minute. He's continuing to have a sort of a slightly above average year. But are you a believer in Portland? It depends on who they face in the first round of the playoffs.
I think that's going to be the key, right? So that who they face in the playoffs. Right now, they would place the Clippers, and I mean, the problem is that no one can stay healthy on that team. McCollum just came back, and Jokic. We'll see. I think he's supposed to be coming back this week. So I want to see how this team looks at full strength, because I think this team at full strength, they could be right up there with the Jazz and the Suns and the Clippers. The problem is that we haven't been able to see it. And give Dame Lillard credit, and Carmelo Anthony, he's found a fountain of youth. Give him credit, but I just kind of I want to see this here at full strength, because I think that this team would be right there in the elite in the West.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with the Portland Trail Blazers. Before we move on, Lakeena, let's get into a few games that people should keep their eyes on for this upcoming week. Let's go to the Tuesday schedule, which is today for March 30th, 2021. NBA TV will feature this game at 8 o'clock Chicago time. That's the Denver Nuggets hosting the Philadelphia 76ers from Ball Arena in Denver, Colorado. Also at 9 o'clock, we'll have the Phoenix Suns hosting the Atlanta Hawks. Trae Young versus Devin Booker.
Should be a lot of fun between those two young players. Going to tomorrow's slate, which is Wednesday. The first game, the TNT doubleheader. Hopefully, Luka will be back for this one as Dallas faces Boston. Boston, starting to kind of get a little bit better. We'll see how they look. They've made some big trades too. We'll see how they look in their new digs. Houston and Brooklyn. I know Houston, they're tanking, but that's all, that's always fun. Utah and Memphis, that should be a good one too. The nightcap of that ESPN doubleheader, Milwaukee and the Lakers. We'll see. There's definitely two teams are going to be grinding it out, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm assuming it'll be the debut of Andre Drummond in the Lakers uniform, so I want to see how that plays out. And Giannis Antetokounmpo, he did not play in Saturday's loss against the Knicks. I'm assuming he's going to be back for that game as well. So this should be fun. Also, our good friend Alana Techhour, her new look of Miami Heat will travel to Indiana to take on the Pacers.
Yeah.
And that's at 6 p.m. Chicago time.
I know they feel bad they missed out on I think Aldridge, because I guess that all the buzz was early Saturday that he was going to Miami, but then instead he goes a little bit further north to goes to Brooklyn. So
yep.
safe to say the Heat fans are not very pleased about that. So, but we'll see how the new look Heat look.
Yes, we will see. Thursday, April 1st, as we turn the calendar at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time, we'll have Philadelphia travel to Cleveland to take on the Cavaliers. But the first game of the TNT doubleheader, which they'll go back to now since March Madness is winding down from the college scene, it's the Charlotte Hornets traveling to Brooklyn to take on the Nets. Will Kevin Durant be back for that game? We're not sure, but Kyrie Irving will be back. Of course, hopefully it'll be the debut of LaMarcus Aldridge in the Brooklyn Nets uniform. That should be a whole lot of fun.
Oh, well, I want to see how they look. Golden State and Miami, that should be an interesting one at 7 o'clock. The nightcap of that TNT doubleheader, Denver and the Clippers. Always fun when those two teams play each other.
Yes, that should be a bar burner. Who is going to be a track meet, folks? Who can score over 120 points? Who can get there the fastest?
First there wins. The Friday slate. The first doubleheader of the NBA TV doubleheader, because ESPN is going to be doing the women's Elite Eight matchup. So that's why these games are going to be on NBA TV, I should say. Dallas and the Knicks. That should be interesting.
Yeah, the Knicks are a serious contender for the playoffs. Tom Thibodeau, as you mentioned earlier, Lakeena, he has that team playing well right now. Of course, led by all-star forward Julius Randle. And of course, you have Derrick Rose over there now, our guy from Chicago. So let's see if they can bring their A game against another playoff caliber team in the Dallas Mavericks. Yeah,
they're going to have baseball too, ESPN is. So that's why these games are going to be on NBA TV. Let's see, what's another one? Of course, the nightcapper of that doubleheader, you got Milwaukee and Portland, Giannis versus Dame. That should be a whole lot of fun. And this could be another one of those track meets. I mean, the first to 110 wins, I guess.
Of course, you have the Bulls and the Jazz at 8 o'clock the Chicago time on Friday. And, of course, the nightcap going on at the same time at 9 o'clock Chicago time will be the Los Angeles Lakers taking on the Sacramento Kings. Of course, Sacramento defeated the Lakers before the last game before the All-Star break. The Lakers will have revenge on their minds. Of course, Andre Drummond and those guys will travel to Sacramento to take on the Kings. Of course, LeBron and AD are still out, but the Lakers will have a better roster. Hopefully they can defeat Sacramento. Sacramento's starting to play better a little bit in these last few games.
Yeah, we'll see how they look. I'm sure they're going to be, be fits for a lot of these playoff bound teams. So I'm sure. Look, don't take Sacramento lightly. That should be a good one there though in Sacramento on Friday night.
Yes, don't take Sacramento lightly. So that's our NBA talk. Let's switch over to baseball, Lakeena. Thursday, April 1st, 2021 will be opening day for the majority of the teams around Major League Baseball as spring training is winding down. Lakeena, let's focus in on our Chicago teams, the Cubs and the Sox. We'll start off in the NL Central, of course. The Cubs are the defending division champions from that shortened season of a year ago at 60 games. Of course, you have Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, which we expect to be the bottom of the cellar dwellers of that division. But I think St. Louis, St. Louis is going to be the class of that division, I believe.
It's good. Look,
especially added Nolan Arenado.
Look, it's going to be between the Pirates and the Orioles for worst team in baseball. Let's just get that out the way right now. I think the Cardinals will win the division. I think the Cubs will be right there, playing for those wild card spots. Cincy, I just don't know what I'm going to get from Cincy. You just don't know if they're ready for the big time yet. Mm-hmm. The Brewers, yes, they got Yelich, but they've kind of, stepped back a little bit. And that's where I see the Central and the NL side.
Yeah, I have St. Louis winning that division, but I'm going to pay attention to their starting pitching. They struggled a year ago. They have the offense, but if they're getting consistent starting pitching, I think they could run away with this one. But I just don't see them doing that. So it's going to be a battle all year. I think second place will come down between the Cubs and the Brewers. Like you said, those two teams just mirror each other. The Cubs are floundering around 500 around trading that time. Goodbye, Chris Bryant. Maybe goodbye, Wilson Contreras. So we just don't know. But I think one of those teams will finish in second place. Cincinnati, I think they'll take out that spot next. And then, of course, Pittsburgh will carry the bottom feeders of that division.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So let's go east in the NL here, Sid. The odds here, they've got the Mets win that division.
Well, they lost out on Trevor Bauer, so I think they're still going to be a competitive team, but I think they'll be better suited for a wild card spot. So I'm picking them. So I'm picking the Mets for a wild card spot. Philadelphia, I told people for the last year or so they'll be a better team. It may end up that way, but I got to see more. The Marlins, they benefit for a shortened year last year, get into the playoffs, actually beating the Cubs in that wild card series. Remember, folks, there are no wild card series this year. It's just the two teams that finished with the top two records for second place. They'll battle out as usual for the chance to participate in the playoffs. Of course, you had the Atlanta Braves. They were up 3-1 last year on the Dodgers in the NLCS before blowing that. Of course, you still have the Washington Nationals. They have Kyle Schwarber, I believe, over there now. Yep. And they have John Lester, too, both former Cubs. Will that be enough? Me personally, I don't think so. I'm going to give the edge to the Atlanta Braves, but I think the New York Mets are going to be a little bit better than what people think. I have them as one of my wild card teams.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a battle between those two in the East, I think. Although if Philly can sort of, get that momentum that they did like late last year, I think they could probably throw a monkey wrench into that. So, but I think it's going to be between the Braves and the Mets for the NL East.
Okay, let's go out west. The Los Angeles Dodgers, they're the defending NL West division champions for the 8th straight year. Of course, they're the defending World Series champions as well. Of course, San Diego made a bunch of offseason moves. They gave Fernando Tatis Jr. a 14-year contract extension. Of course, they traded for Yu Darvish. They traded for Blake Snell. They're not going to have Clevenger for this year, but they still have a stacked roster. Now, the AARP team, as I call it, the San Francisco Giants, they're still in there. The Colorado Rockies are rebuilding. The Arizona Diamondbacks, I don't know what to make of them. Yeah, I think it's easy to say it's going to come down to the Padres and the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's going to be like a tug of war between those two. But I'm going to give the edge to the Dodgers until the Padres or somebody else beat them. I think they're the defending champs. They're not going to want to relinquish it. It's going to be a fight, though. And the Padres, I want to see it. I want to see how this team looks on the field. They've made all the moves. Mm-hmm. Let's see how they look. The Diamondbacks, like you said, I don't know what to think of the Diamondbacks because – I don't know what they're doing. We know, the Rockies are Arenado now gone. They're kind of going to start wipe the slate clean and start over. And also with the Giants too, they got like you said, AARP team. So we forget about those too. So it's definitely going to be between the Dodgers and the Padres.
And the Padres will be my second wild card team. So my division winners from the National League are the Braves from the East, the Cardinals from the Central, the Dodgers in the West. My two wild card teams are the Mets and the Padres.
And let's see, mine are the Braves, the Cardinals, and the Dodgers. And I will say the Mets and the Padres.
Stop stealing my picks.
I know, but look, I would say the Cubs, but I want to see, how they look, but again, look, strange things have happened, so we'll see. Let's go to the
That's
AL.
true.
Well, let's go to AL. We'll start the Central with the White Sox. You got to think it's gonna be between the White Sox and the Twins for that division.
Of course, we mentioned the injuries of Eloy Jimenez. He's going to be out for the next 5, perhaps 6 months. You may get him back towards the end of August. I still expect this team to do well. Lakeena is going to a battle between them and the Minnesota Twins. I don't trust the starting pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. Look at their playoff performances the last few years, folks. The numbers are ugly as you know what. And the offense fails in the playoffs as well. But with that being said, I expect to be a battle between those two teams. Cleveland, I know that manager Terry Francona has those guys up every day, so they're going to be competitive, but I think they're going to fall short. Of course, Kansas City, I think they're another year or two away. Don't count them out. They're not going to win the division, let me say that right now, but they're going to be a better ball club. They're a couple of years behind where the White Sox were a couple of years ago. So that's why I see Kansas City. Detroit, I know they got that cheater in the manager, A.J. Hinch over there, but I don't expect them to do too much. They're not going to surprise anybody. Forget about Detroit. So I have the White Sox finishing first. How many wins do I give them? I'm giving them exactly 90 wins. I took a couple wins off because of the injury to Jimenez. I was going to pick it up at least 92, 93 wins, but I see them around that 89, 90 range. I'm going exactly with 90 wins.
Stop stealing. Get out of my head, Sid. Get out of my head, because that's where I got the White Sox. I got them winning the division with 90 wins. I think the Twins, they'll make it interesting, but I think they'll get I'll give them one of the wild card spots. Look, Cleveland. You said it. I mean, Francona's going to have his guys ready, so they might.
And they lost Lindor in the offseason.
Right, too. So we'll see. Detroit, I think KC could probably be, they could kind of, blow up a little bit. I think Detroit, I think they're still a couple years away too. So, but I think the White Sox will win that division. Let's go East. This should be a very fun division, Sid.
Yeah, so the Baltimore Orioles, as we said at the top, they'll be the cellar dwellers in that division. Of course, you have the Red Sox. I don't know, they hired another cheater, Alex Cora, back to manage that team. Of course, the Yankees are always at the top. The Tampa Bay Rays, as I gave credit to their manager, Kevin Cash, the last couple of years, they traded away Blake Snell to San Diego in the offseason. They're still looking forward to be competitive. Watch out for the Toronto Blue Jays. I know they made a late push toward the end of last year to get in that wild card round. I'm not picking them to win the division, but I have them as one of my wild card teams coming out of the American League. It's going to be just one team coming out of the AL East as far as the wild card is concerned. I'm going with Toronto, led by Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah, that pitching, their pitching, their starting pitching still concerns me a little bit. But I think they could definitely play within the wild card spot, like you said. So they made a late push, just didn't have enough games to do it. But I'm looking forward to this team breaking through. But I'm still going to pick the Yankees. So, but they made a lot of moves there, the Yankees have. And look, I think that they want to get that taste of last year out of their mouth. So they're on a mission, and I think they're going to try. I think they're going to win the division again.
Yeah, I got the Yankees winning the division, and my first wild card team will be the Toronto Blue Jays coming out of the East. Now let's go over to the AL West. Lakeena, Joe Madden, former Cubs manager, he's going into his second year as the manager of the Angels. They'll open up against the White Sox on Thursday night. Of course, you have the Oakland Athletics. They're the defending division champions. You have the Houston Astros as well. They'll face some fans and hopefully some scrutiny from a couple years ago. They're led by Dusty Baker. Of course, they were a couple of moments away from reaching the World Series last year. And you have the Seattle Mariners and the Texas Rangers bringing up the rear.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting division, the AL West. I mean, you saw what Oakland did last year. They got over the hump and won a division, but then you have Houston, maybe, and then you have, the Mariners. They're kind of like creeping up. I think they're still about a year or two away. Joe Madden and his crew over in Los Angeles, Angels, Anaheim, Southern California, Orange County, whatever. Be interested to see what happens with that. So I guess I'll give it to Oakland, but I think, but I don't think there's gonna be a wild card team coming out of that division.
I would have to disagree with you, Lakeena. I'm going with Houston to win the division, and my second wild card team will be the Oakland Athletics coming out of the AL West. So, which means I have the Minnesota Twins out.
Funny.
I know I'm going crazy here, but sometimes that's how baseball is. So my two wild card teams coming out of the American League will be Toronto and Oakland. I have Houston win the AL West.
Well, I have Houston being the wild card team, and I have Toronto too being the other wild card team. So, we disagree a little bit in the AL, but it should be a lot of fun. And please, folks, do not take our picks at face value. All right? Don't take them at face value.
Except we get them correct.
Well, yeah. Well, feel free to duplicate us if we get them correct. But no. But yeah. Well, very likely don't take it at face value.
You're listening to Second City Sports along with Lakeena McGee, which is she. I am Sitting Brown, which is me. We have only a couple minutes left, Lakeena. We have a couple things to talk about as far as announcers retiring and one re-signing. But first, let's get to the NFL. As you mentioned at the top, they will play 17 games starting next season in 2021. I don't know if they're going to have the expanded playoffs like they did last year, Lakeena, but we knew that this was coming. The players will have to play an extra game. They'll get paid an extra game in their paychecks. The NFL is maximizing their opportunities to make more money. That's the way I see it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, we all thought this was coming, right, Sid? I mean, we all thought the 17th game. I mean, look, there will be one less preseason game, which I think people will be okay with because of this. So, look, I know Alvin Kamara, Cam Jordan, and Darius Slay, among other players, have said that, well, we're not too crazy about the idea. Well, look, y'all could have talked to your league, your union people about that. So, it is what it is. So, I mean, look, more revenue for the NFL, and they got the new TV deal now, so it's going to be even more money. So, cha-ching.
Yep, that's what professional sports is. It all comes down to money, and we should not be surprised about that. So the NFL is moving in the right direction in terms for them, and we're all going to be watching. Like you said, Lakeena, people are complaining now, but when it comes to August, we'll have a normal preseason. We believe, I think we will this year. And then, of course, when the regular season kicks off in September, we'll be right back rushing to our computers and our televisions, and we'll be rushing back to the stadiums as well, watching our favorite NFL teams.
Yeah, so like I said, it is what it is. I know some players are not going to be happy with this, but, what can you do right now?
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of football, well, let's give out some love. Shout out to our good friend Lamont Scott. He's actually doing other duties right now. Hopefully he'll rejoin us again soon. But Dick Stockton, a longtime play-by-play man from Fox, CBS back in the day. We grew up watching and listening to him during the games on CBS for the NFL and for the NBA. Of course, he did Turner for almost for 20 plus years in the 90s into the 2000 to the early 20 teens as well. He announced his retirement at the age of 78. Of course, he did 4 games for Fox last season as well for their football coverage. So he had a great Hall of Fame career. Here's to you, Mr. Stockton. Congratulations on a great career. Good luck on your retirement. Of course, I know a lot of people have made fun of his mistakes throughout the last few years. Of course, we poked fun at him in a good way on this show, thanks to Lamont. Of course, he was the oldest on our show. We called him the Dick Stockton of our show. But in his prime, it was no one better than him. Of course, you can say Marv Albert, who's still doing it for Turner Sports for the NBA. And Dick Stockton is a generational type voice. He did the 75 World Series with NBC. Now a Hall of Fame broadcaster, Hawk Harrelson, longtime announcer for the Sox, who did color for that game as well. So he had a Hall of Fame career. His voice spans for generations. He leaves a legacy that'll never be forgotten. Hopefully he enjoys retirement. How much long he has on this earth. So he laid the groundwork for everybody today. So good luck on his retirement to Mr. Dick Stockton.
Yeah, 55 years. He was games, and look at his prime when he was doing when NBC with CBS, I should say, had the NBA. There was no one better. So doing those coverage. So yes, we make fun of the gaps he's done in recent years, but at his prime, I mean, Dick Stockton was just phenomenal sportscaster for both the NBA and the NFL on CBS. So look, happy retirement, and hope he enjoys it. He's earned it.
Yeah, just real quick, one of my favorite all-time crews when he was doing the games for the NBA, especially the last 2 years for the NBA on CBS. It was him and Hubie Brown. Of course, they were reunited in the late 90s and the early 2000s at Turner Sports. Of course, he did the NFL games when he got to Fox with Matt Millen. Of course, what a coincidence. His last game for Fox was the Houston and Cleveland game. He was reunited once again with his old partner, Matt Millen. Yeah. And they were the number 2 team at Fox behind Summerall and Madden when the NFL on Fox got started in 1994.
Yeah. It was definitely got those memories there with those two. And look, I hope he enjoys his retirement. He's, like I said, he's earned it. And, gonna be interested to see what, Fox does. I mean, they got a pretty deep roster there. So it'll be interesting to see who they replace him with.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. And before we get out of here, Lakeena, you wanted to mention Jim Nantz. He resigns with CBS. He's the number 1 play-by-play man for college basketball and for the NFL. Of course, they re-signed Iron Eagle as well. So CBS has the top 2 voices for that network right now.
Yeah, and look, I know people were streaming about, he can go to ESPN or whatnot. He wasn't going anywhere. He's been with this will be his 36th year with CBS. He's completing. He's been doing this since he was 25. He's been working at that network since he was 25 years old. He's done masters. He did college football for a little bit for the first few years. Been doing NFL and college hoops, ever since. And he's kind of like one of those guys. You're kind of seeing more of his personality, especially when you saw those commercials he does with Charles Barkley and Kenny Smith and the gang.
Yeah.
Those are pretty cool. And look, I think that he's totally deserving. And I think that he'll be hearing his voice for a long time. He said that he wants to call the Masters till he's 70. So he's on his way to doing just that.
Yeah, I know Mike Tirico, before he jumped to NBC, he was doing when ESPN does the when he did the first couple of days of the Masters on ESPN. He was very professional at his job and doing that. But there's no better voice than Jim Nantz, especially during the weekend coverage for CBS for the Masters. I know I'm not much of a golf fan, as you well know. I'm a casual fan, especially when Tiger's there on a Sunday. There's no one better to call the Masters tournament than Jim Nantz for CBS. Of course, he's done better at, with the NFL as being the number 1 man for the last almost decade and a half, especially now with Tony Romo. He just called the Super Bowl from last season with Kansas City and Tampa Bay. So he's a golden voice again. And so glad he's sticking around for another few years with CBS. Real quick before we get out of here, Lakeena, I was watching some old games on YouTube a couple months ago, and I knew that he did some stuff before he went to CBS, but this I didn't know. I don't know if you knew about this. He was the color analyst for the late, great Hot Rod Hundley during the Utah Jazz games in the mid-'80s before Karl Malone and John Stockton. John Stockton was drafted there, but Karl Malone wasn't drafted yet, because if you guys well know, John Stockton was part of that great 84 NBA draft class, which many people consider the greatest draft class in NBA history. But I was watching an old Utah Bulls game from 1985. Of course, this was Michael Jordan's rookie year, and they had the Utah broadcast. Hot Rod Hundley, may so rest in peace. I think one of the great voices, basketball voices in history. He's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Of course, he worked with the CBS back in the day with Brent Musburger on color during the late 70s and early 80s. But this is when Hot Rod took over the voice of the Utah Jazz, and Jim Nantz was his color guy. I was like, I didn't know this. So I was like, he sounded good, but who knew will he become what he is now? Talking about Jim Nantz.
Yeah, I think he was fresh out of college at Houston at the
Yeah.
time when that happened. So
Yeah.
so
right before he moved to CBS.
Yeah, so
nationally.
he was like in his early 20s. So look, he's been doing this forever.
Yeah.
He's the voice for our generation. So it's good that he's still still. Excuse me, still sounds great, and look, it's good to see that he'll be around the network for another few years. It's great. Love it.
It's great. Yeah. Before we get out of here, Lakeena, we want to remind our listeners and viewers you can catch both our Chicago Cubs and Chicago White Sox preview shows right here on YouTube at War Media. Once again, at WARR Media. You can also catch the audio version of those podcasts on War on Anchor, wherever you download your podcast, as we get you set for opening day, which is coming up this Thursday, April 1st. I cannot wait.
Yeah, it should be a whole lot of fun. And also too, I watched Unsung with Morris Day. A lot of stuff I didn't know about Mr. Day. Some of the stuff I knew, but some of the stuff I didn't know. And also too, with the time, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, Prince kicked them out the band, but Jimmy was like, bye, see ya. But
let's discuss that in our next episode.
Yeah.
Let's go deeper into that, because I got some stuff on that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. So on that note, you follow me at Keenan McGee on the Twitter, and Keenan is going to be on the IG.
You can follow yours truly, Sydney Brown, on the Twitter and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. You can go to our website, weareregalradio.com. That's WEAREREGAL radio.com. You can follow our station. Follow us on all social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at War Media. Once again, at WAR Media. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Yeah, I think I got everything covered.
Yeah, I'll say we're not on TikTok yet, so we're not on TikTok yet. So clear that up.
Yeah, I was gonna say something else, but I'll keep it out of my mouth. You can catch Second City Sports, this podcast, along with the other podcast programming from War Media, by simply going to War on Anchor, which keeps you on the Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and the iHeartRadio app. Just type in that search engine box, War on Anchor, on all podcast platforms. And you can go to YouTube and watch us at War Media. Once again, at WAR Media on YouTube. You can not only listen to us, but watch us do our thing live. Thank you, NFS, for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Yes, let's head up out of here, Lakeena. I'm getting ready for opening day.
Yes.
It's going to be a great year, at least for my team anyway, on the south side for the White Sox. Despite the injury to Eloy Jimenez, I cannot wait as we get real baseball underway. And hopefully as the months and weeks go by, the restrictions will become looser. And will they loosen up on the restrictions? I think they will. I cannot wait to get out to the ballpark. We'll have 20 to 35% capacity at all these ballparks will open today across the nation. Of course, 20% here in Chicago for both the north side and the south side, as we start to get back to some normalcy here.
Some sense of normal, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
All right. So check out, make sure you check out those previews that we have for you. We post up later this week. So for Sid, I'm Lakeena. This has been Second City Sports Zoom style, and we'll see you later this week.
Till next time, holla.